Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be splitting my time with the member for Grand Prairie. I said in my maiden speech when I got to this august chamber that this seat does not belong to me. Indeed, it belongs to the people of Elgin, St. Thomas, London South. I am a mere custodian of it. And I say that to make the point that Parliament itself, this House of Commons, these institutions are bigger than any of us as individuals. They're bigger than all of us even as a collective. These institutions matter more. This place matters more than the political ambitions and motivations and decisions of the people that get to come here every election. I have always venerated this institution. Indeed, I've always been fascinated by it. Even going back to when I was a university student involved in politics, I loved partaking in model parliament. I loved taking that opportunity to learn more, and perhaps that's why I've never been reprimanded for not addressing my comments through the chair or some of these other conventions, because I've been a student of parliamentary history. It was the first day I walked into this chamber and remains the honor of a lifetime to be here. And it's been saddening in that same vein to see how, for this Liberal government, and specifically for the Prime Minister, Parliament is a mere annoyance. We have seen the ignorance to this place. The fact that the Prime Minister has a question period attendance rating that is a fraction of that of his predecessors. The fact that he loves showboating, to use a word he's fond of, with fake executive orders, which have no legal standing in our country. Doing everything but governing in this place, governing in this chamber. Because to govern in this chamber is to be held accountable to Parliament. Parliament as the collective body representing the will of the Canadian people. Parliament, a body comprised of fellow custodians of this chamber, sent here with very similar mandates from each of their respective constituencies and constituents. But we see in the motion before us today that the government does not believe it can win the game, so to speak, so it is changing the rules to suit its political ambitions, irrespective of the will of the Canadian people, irrespective of the norms and conventions and traditions of this place. It should be known to everyone here that Canadians do not, in fact, elect a government. They elect a parliament. Tomorrow marks the one-year anniversary since Canadians elected me alongside all of my colleagues from all parties. Canadians elected a minority parliament. The message Canadians sent in doing that was that while they were prepared to give the Liberals a fourth term, I question why, but while they were prepared to give the Liberals a fourth term, Canadians wanted their power to be checked by a strong, robust opposition. Now, my Conservative colleagues and I have held up our end of the bargain as His Majesty's loyal opposition. We supported and improved legislation such as Bill C-5, C-14, and Bill C-16, which is before the Justice Committee right now. We opposed dangerous bills such as Bill C-2 and Bill C-9, which the Liberals wanted to wave through without scrutiny and accountability. We worked collaboratively across party lines. We represented the will of Canadians who elected MPs to champion, as far as those of us on the Conservative side of the aisle here, to champion the values of liberty, the values of personal responsibility, and yes, the value of fiscal discipline. But what we've seen over the last year is that when the Liberals do not get their way, they scream obstruction. Opposition is not obstruction. We have seen this in a minority parliament. A minority parliament, and I recall when Stephen Harper and the Conservatives had one just a few years ago, required the government, it requires the government to find dance partners, so to speak, to find collaboration and earn collaboration from opposition parties. This idea of holding opposition parties hostage to support bad legislation, which is what this Liberal government has tried to do, is not what a minority parliament is supposed to be. Now, we have seen under this arrangement, specifically at committees, a situation in which the Bloc has held the balance of power. Now, I have seen votes where Bloc and Conservative support was enough to pass a motion against the will of the Liberals. I have seen Liberal and Bloc members pass motions against the will of Conservatives. And on a rare occasion, I might have even seen Liberals and Conservatives vote together, with the Bloc being the odd party out. Now, even when we've lost a vote, frustrating as that may be, I can take comfort in the knowledge that the Liberals were forced to cooperate with someone. They had a check, however modest, on their power. Today, the Liberals will enshrine their desire for a legislative blank check, stacking parliamentary committees to reflect their morally illegitimate majority. An illegitimate majority, I say, because it was crafted not by the democratic will of Canadians, but by the Prime Minister sending out his cabinet ministers to peel away the unscrupulous and the shameless. Opposition MPs who hold the will of the Canadian people in as little esteem as the Liberals do. And this morally illegitimate majority is the consequence of that which they now seek to ratify by stacking the deck on committees. Committees are not the property of the government. They are creatures of Parliament. In many ways, they are where the real work happens, where scrutiny can happen, where amendments can happen, where real vigorous debates on the merits or lack thereof of legislation happen. So if the government can manufacture a majority at will, scrutiny is merely choreography. They are seeking not to have a check on their power, not to have a scrutiny on their legislation, but rather to have a rubber stamp on anything they want to do. I'm reminded of a quote from John Diefenbaker. In April of 1957, he was speaking at Massey Hall in Toronto, and he said, "The sovereignty of the people is delegated to Parliament, not to the executive." Now, the Prime Minister could learn a great many things from John Diefenbaker. One of these lessons is that government is about accountability, not control. Another lesson is that parliamentary scrutiny should be welcomed and not scorned. As evidence these Liberals are uninterested in accountability and collaboration, one need look only at how they rejected our modest amendment to the very motion we're debating today, which would have preserved the status quo on oversight committees, such as ethics and government operations and estimates, among others. Committees that are not responsible for reviewing legislation, but committees that are tasked with being a watchdog on the government. Now, why the Liberals do not want to cede control on a committee overseeing ethics, I think, is becoming more apparent by the day. But that is precisely what we are looking at here. A government that does not wish to engage in Parliament, a Prime Minister who holds this institution in contempt, and a government that does not want to engage in something so seemingly beneath it as seeking and preserving the will of the Canadian people to enact its legislative agenda. This motion that we have before us today, which I will be opposing, does not strengthen Parliament. It sidelines it. And that is something that every member of this House should reject. I go back to the comment I made earlier about when the Liberals try to invoke obstruction as a narrative. We have given them much of what they've asked for when they have sought permission to do things that will build this country up. Bill C-5 is a great example of this. They said they wanted monumental, sweeping authority to approve major projects. We said, okay, we'd love to see major projects. We gave the permission to do it, the framework to do it. And no major projects have materialized. Here we are a year later. The Liberal government has promised much and delivered little. And the one mechanism that could be preserved to ensure that this Parliament remained keeping with what Canadians elected was a committee structure that would force members of Parliament, that would force government members to do what the Liberals claim they have wanted this whole time, which is collaboration. But no, they are laying their demands bare today with this motion. They do not want collaboration. They do not want cooperation. All they want is capitulation. And we say no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Here, here.
Questions and comments. Question and commentary. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, it's interesting comments the member has put on the record. I disagree in most of those comments. As I've illustrated before, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the Prime Minister has talked about working in collaboration. We saw a good example of that earlier this morning. We own a majority government, yet we passed a member of opposition's legislation through on third reading. You know, the collaboration is what's important. When you take a look at the Standing Committee, very simple. If you have a majority of members that make up on the floor of the House of Commons, you get a majority on the standing committees. That's every Prime Minister that's had a majority has had that situation. I don't think we should be trying to pass judgment on individual members. I think we should be recognizing and supporting parliamentary tradition. Does he not support?
The Honourable Member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague opposite likes to say that the Liberals are interested in working with all parties, but interestingly enough, the new Liberal Member of Parliament for Sarnia-Lambton-Bukeshwanong had a very different story to say. In fact, she said that she was trying to get federal attention and investment in her riding and did not get so much as a response until she crossed the floor to the Liberals. She said, and this is after she crossed the floor, that it really went nowhere until I crossed the floor. That is what I'm hoping will be the result. So these Liberals are only interested in working for Liberals.
Speaker, we saw in Bill C-11, the Military Justice Modernization Act, that even though the committee had unanimous agreement on amendments, when it came to report stage, the amendments were all stripped out. So the government already is all powerful in here in what it wants to get done. What other aspects of committee will the government now control besides amendments and the other things we do in committee, for example, besides scrutinizing bills?
The Honourable Member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for that tremendous question. It isn't just about amendments, as she indicates. It's also about the agendas for committees. There are a number of committees that engage in studies that want to invite ministers to appear. And as we've seen in the case of the Ethics Committee, the Liberals have staged a massive filibuster to block the Finance Minister from having to testify about his clear conflicts of interest on the $90 billion Alto boondoggle. So it isn't just about amendments, it's about avoiding ministerial accountability at the committee level, where members get the chance, not just in a 35-second question period slot, but in a real substantive way to question ministers who right now desperately need the accountability and scrutiny.